Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me for a few minutes. Obviously, incredibly disappointed in the governor's veto, not only of the tax bill, but also of the supplemental spending bill. You know, there's a lot of people that are going to be hurt by this, and I just can't tell you how incredibly disappointed I am that the governor chose politics over helping these people. So, you know, I have a list of people in front of me that are going to be affected by this, and it just, I mean, it's a staggering, I'm not even going to read it. It's just a staggering list of people. And I think you just heard from some folks that are going to be negatively affected by this. And I think everybody's going to ask why. And the reality is he didn't need to veto the bills. I'm just incredibly disappointed. I'm actually to the point where I'm embarrassed for the governor that he did this. And I don't know how we move forward from here. So I can take some questions.
Were you able to communicate with him? I believe that Senator Daudt said there was really no communication, no forewarning that this was going to happen. Had you heard anything from the governor before these vetoes were?
No, I did not. In fact, you knew about the vetoes before I did. So, which is pretty telling of the last 2 weeks. Every communication that we had with the governor's office, the press knew about before we did. In fact, we invited him to a meeting, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday of last week at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He never even gave us the courtesy of saying no. He literally told the press that he wasn't going to the meeting, didn't even tell us. So the governor's actions in the last couple of weeks have literally been embarrassing. And here we are. Now there's a whole pile of Minnesotans who are going to be irreparably damaged by this.
Mr. Speaker, this was kind of a gamble. You put all the stuff in one bill, 986 pages. If these are so important, why not separate them out?
You know, even when we did separate things out, I'll bring your attention to the deputy registrar money. We sent that by itself. The governor vetoed that and then put in his veto letter that he vetoed it because it wasn't part of a bigger bill. I'm just... I don't even have anything to say. I can't answer for how illogical this governor has been for the last 2 weeks, and beyond that. But 2 weeks that I'm paying attention to.
You're embarrassed by his actions. You're disappointed. He's been illogical. What are you saying? Are you describing a governor in what? In what state?
I have worked with this governor for 6 years as leader of my caucus, 4 years as the Speaker of the House, every opportunity this governor will choose politics over people. I think he genuinely wants to help people, but when given the opportunity, you know, he could have signed this bill. You know, I think when you look at his reasons for vetoing it, they're very, very weak. He very obviously chose politics over helping these people, and I don't know if he really understands the depth at which people will suffer because he vetoed these bills.
Would you path forward short of see you next year to the next governor, whoever that may be?
The governor can call a special session. If he wants to do that, we'll certainly come back. But
will you ask him to do that?
I will not. I think these folks need to ask him to do that. I think the people impacted by these bills need to ask the governor to do that. The governor obviously didn't show up to do his job the last few weeks. And you know, now he wants to veto bills and blame other people. I think we elected this governor to be the leader of the state, and I think he has failed our state. And the people who are going to be hurt by this are the ones who need to call him to action now.
He left open a door ever so slightly to the possibility of maybe a lame duck session after the elections. Something he said he would have to be convinced upon. Is that a possibility? Especially for the tax component.
Again, our Constitution gives our governor the ability to call a special session, so I'll leave that ball in his court. I really wish that he would have taken advantage of the last 3 months and engaged us in a way that we could have gotten some meaningful things done. Even when he was not engaged, we did our job. In fact, in a couple of occasions, we did it more than once, and that still wasn't enough. So I think, you know, he's, by saying he doesn't want to have a special session and that he didn't want to, participate in negotiations at the end of this session, he doesn't care an awful lot about the people that will be hurt by these bills, apparently.
Mr. Speaker, even conceding the point that the governor didn't need to do this, by putting everything in all in one bill, you're sort of giving him an all or nothing sort of choice. Will you take a different approach next time? Will you do something different than piling everything into a 989-page bill in the future?
Well, next time there will be a different governor, so I have a feeling you'll find out that the common denominator in all of the difficulties we've had for the last 8 years has been our governor. I remember a time in 2013 or 14, probably was in 14 actually, at the end of that session. I was the minority leader, and all 4 leaders sat in a room and signed an agreement. And then Paul Thiessen, who was then speaker, took that agreement for the governor to sign, and the governor refused to sign it. And that was when Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. And we all threw our arms up in the air and said, you know what? We're just going to do it anyway. We have agreement amongst the 4 legislative leaders. We're just going to pass these bills and send them to his desk. I mean, more often than not, this governor, when asked to engage, has been missing in action. And even when Democrats were in control of the legislature, he refused to come to the table and he refused to sign agreements. He ended up signing all those bills. There was nothing really objectionable in the agreements. He just wouldn't, he wouldn't engage. He wouldn't be part of it. And I think the people that lose are the people that were just in this room, the disability community, schools, you name it. I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be hurt by the governor's actions today.
Is the risk
press
reward
on this issue, to press on that issue, to follow up if I could, sorry. You bear some responsibility, do you not? The governor says that you folks put all this in there. You took a risk, and in fact, he says that this is exactly what you want.
No, what we wanted was for the governor to sign the bills. That's why we sent them to him. Even when we separated out individual items and sent them to the governor, and the best example of that is the deputy registrar bill. We sent him a clean bill to give $9 million to deputy registrars to help them through an emergency that this governor created. He said he supported it. He vetoed the funding, and in his letter he said, I'm vetoing this funding because it's not included in a bigger bill. And in that letter he had the gall to say, even though I'm vetoing it, I do support this funding. I'm sorry. I can't even respond to that. It doesn't make any sense.
Respectfully but directly, we've never seen a bill this big. We've never seen a bill like this with so many subjects in one package. This is War and Peace.
There was a lot of really good things to help a lot of Minnesotans in this bill.
A lot of bad things that they thought.
Well, could he list them for you? Seemed to me that when I heard about the press conference, the governor had trouble remembering what the bad things were that were in the bill. The reality was the governor was never going to sign these bills. I knew that when he came out with his school funding. I'll give you a tax bill when you give me $130 million for schools. And you know what? We called his bluff. We gave schools $225 million, and he vetoed it anyway. Because that's what he wanted to create in an election year, was that somehow this session was a failure. This session wasn't a failure. Our governor was a failure. And Minnesotans will be hurt because he chose politics over people. That's the reality of what happened.
He's saying you guys did the same thing. You sent him a bill knowing he would veto it to take on the campaign.
6 times last week that I can remember, we tried to meet with the governor and he wouldn't meet with us. He did meet with us once or twice here or there, came to the table on Tuesday morning and said, I refuse to negotiate with you. Oh, okay. There's almost a week left of session. You're refusing to negotiate with us. What did he expect us to do? We were going to get our work done on time, and we did. And we're very proud of the product that we put on his desk. That legislation would have helped hundreds, if not thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans. And now those people will be hurt by his actions.
Do you intend to take this approach again in the future? Will we see larger than the 898-page bill?
The problem will not exist after the next election because this governor will no longer be in office. I think, I don't want to make the story about me, and I don't want to make the story about the governor. This story is about all of the people that the governor has hurt by vetoing this bill. That's what the story today is about.
How Outside this building, I think a lot of Minnesotans think it's a failure of everybody, a failure of government.
That's what the governor wants people to believe. But, you know, I can't answer for why the governor wasn't engaged during session. He'll have to answer those questions.
What do you think?
I don't know. I
Is
don't
he
know,
up
but
to the job, Mr. Speaker?
his parking spot sits empty there almost every day. He doesn't even come to the Capitol.
What are you saying? He's not engaged in the job?
He hasn't been engaged. He hasn't been engaged at all in his job here.
Is he up for the job?
I don't know. That's for you to answer. But today, he made a grave mistake and vetoed bills that would have helped hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans. And now those people will be hurt. He wanted money for education. I think you're going to see on special education, because of the forecast adjustment in the finance bill, you're probably going to see a $60 to $90 million cut to schools because of this veto. So the ramifications are real, and the hurt that people will feel because of this is real. It's not politics. This is real.
Can you talk a little bit about the campaign trail, though? How do you explain what happened this year to voters who voting members on?
You know, and we're not done. The governor has a bonding bill on his desk as well that we're waiting. I don't think he's signed that yet, right? I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to predict he vetoes that too, for no other reason than politics. But we'll see what happens. My folks, when they go on the campaign trail, are going to have a lot of really great things that they can talk about. Not only this session, but last session as well. We put a record amount of money into road and bridge infrastructure. We passed a record amount of tax relief. We did a lot of great things that really will help Minnesotans. So we're going to be really proud of that as we go out on the campaign trail. And I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that this session had to end this way, but I can't force the governor to be engaged in the process. I can't force him to help Minnesotans. We can only do our part, and the Constitution has given us the ability to come into session during a certain window and pass bills and put them on the governor's desk. The Constitution doesn't give me the right to sign bills, but what this governor has failed to realize is the Constitution doesn't give him the ability to pass bills. He actually has to work with us, and that's the part in 8 years that he has never figured out. He's never figured out how to work with the legislature, and I'm afraid that that will be his failed legacy.
Mr. Speaker, on Saturday night, you left the room with in your final meeting with the governor and said something to the effect of, "We don't expect the governor to sign these bills." Is there anything more that you could have done, or is what you're saying is there's no bill that the governor would have signed?
I think we'll see what happens with the bonding bill, but I actually think at this point there's no bill the governor would have signed. I think he had his mind made up that he was going to veto bills and blame other people for it, and that to me is politics. You know, regardless of the number of people that were hurt, it didn't really matter. The governor had kind of made up his mind on what he was going to do. So, you know, disappointing, of course. On Saturday night, we actually made quite a few more adjustments to the bills and removed things that the governor said were objectionable. We did that right up until Sunday night. One of the last bills on the House floor was a bill removing more things that the governor said were objectionable from the finance bill, just because we were trying to guess where we needed to move to get a signature on the bill. You know, we guessed wrong. Apparently the governor had to have absolutely every single thing that he wanted in the bills. And I'm afraid that that wasn't even going to be enough. You know, when he said, we'll give you a tax bill, a tax conformity bill, which by the way isn't something that we even necessarily want or need. Minnesotans need that so that they can file their taxes next year. He said, you know, you can have a tax bill if schools can have $130 million worth of funding. We called his bluff. We gave schools $225 million worth of funding, and he vetoed the bill anyway. Over what? Nothing. You know, it's just incredibly disappointing, incredibly disheartening.
Is your view that he was never going to sign things in retrospect? Because right after sine die, you predicted that he would sign it. Were you surprised?
I actually thought when he looked at what was in this finance bill, reviewed it, he said he was actually going to take closer to the 14 days to review it. When he looked at what was in these bills, that he would sign them, but he didn't look. He had his mind made up, and you know, you can see why he did this, right? He didn't want to lose the news cycle this week. He wanted, after you get past Memorial Day weekend, right? Nobody remembers the legislative session or that these bills hadn't been signed, right? Get your veto on them now so you can get maximum political exposure out of it. He's using all of you. I hope that's okay with you, but It's unfortunate, because a lot of Minnesotans got run under the bus in the meantime, but.
So you were surprised, really?
Actually, I was, yeah. I expected that he would sign the bills. If you actually look what's in them, and if you look through his list of objections that was left, and there was a very small list, we removed the most objectionable items. There was nothing in that list that you would say, am I willing to live with a $90 million cut to special education, to K-12 schools? Am I willing to live with that because this was so objectionable? No. You know, he brought up a couple of things. 3.5% requirement for agencies to use for cybersecurity. He didn't even say it right in his press conference. I don't know if he was confused about what that money was for. He said it was for MNLARS. You know, the other one is an $18 million cut to DHS. It's not a cut to DHS. We appropriated money last session for the governor to use for a specific purpose. He then transferred that, didn't use it for that purpose, transferred it to use for IT in the future, not even now, but in the future, to get ready for a new computer system. Obviously didn't need the money if he could just transfer it to another use. So we didn't replenish those funds, you know. That's so objectionable that we need to give a $90 million cut to schools? Sorry.
Mr. Speaker, one of the themes that the governor made in his press conference was that you folks, and he said the House GOP specifically. He said
I wonder why he didn't single out the Senate. Maybe because they're not up for election? That's what this is about.
I can only relay what he said.
Right, sure.
Yeah, he said the House GOP cozied up to special interests. He used several examples. He said opioids, meaning Big Pharma. He said guns, meaning the NRA. He said Minnesota Care buy-in, meaning the HMO industry. I want to give you an opportunity to respond to those allegations that you're bad, for lack of a better term.
The Minnesota Care buy-in was removed. That provision that would have prohibited that was removed from the finance bill in that cleanup bill that we did almost the very end of session. So if he's just wrong if he thinks that was in the bill. The opioid thing, I literally called a couple of the opioid manufacturers into my office and said, you need to come to the table. You need to come to the table, and you need to do it voluntarily. I was disappointed that they didn't. One of them came back with an offer that I thought was lackluster, that wasn't going to be helpful. We just simply didn't have the votes for it. And that's not uncommon in the House, right? In an election year, people see that as a tax increase, and people don't want to raise taxes in an election year. So we just didn't have the votes for it. But we also didn't see it about punishing opioid companies or manufacturers. We saw it about helping Minnesotans. And we found that we could actually help Minnesotans regardless of what you did to opioid companies. I believe that opioid manufacturers will get their day in court, and they will get their punishment if they've been bad actors. But I never believed that that was the legislature's job to do that. There are people in the legislature and outside the legislature that are really passionate about the opioid issue, and it became apparent to me through the process that it was almost more important to punish the opioid companies than it was to help Minnesotans. And I hope that wasn't the case, but it looked like that was the case. We split the bill, and the House bill actually didn't have the penny a pill or the fee in it. So from the House's perspective, we weren't on that track anyways. But we did make a commitment at the beginning and all the way through session that we were going to do what we could to help Minnesotans with the opioid crisis. And I believe the legislation we passed was good and would have helped Minnesotans. But it doesn't matter now. It was vetoed.
And what about guns and the NRA?
We have some of the strictest gun laws in the country already, and we have that because Minnesota revisited their gun laws after the Cold Spring or Corey shooting that we had here in Minnesota some years ago. There were some bills that went through. I had an opportunity to not hear those if I didn't want to. I said, no, we're going to have a debate about these issues, and we had public hearings on them, I think, on a couple of occasions in the House. Unfortunately, those bills that were brought forward didn't have enough votes to move out of committee, so they didn't advance further. But I think that people, still want to take an honest, genuine look at those issues and see if there are things we can do to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals. But the governor trying to say that the NRA somehow has, it kind of shows how disconnected the governor is from this building.
Governor, forgive me, Speaker Daudt. I wasn't at the scrum, so I didn't hear in person, but there were indications that you had suggested that there was some possibility of some kind of gun legislation in this session, but that sort of evaporated. I don't know what happened. What's the reality there?
Yeah, I think there was actually one bill introduced that would have, I think, increased the use of background checks, but made it voluntary in those private. I also don't believe that guns are being transferred private party to any great extent. If it does happen, it's between two people that know each other, family members, hunting buddies, that sort of thing. There's not really any evidence that it happens much beyond that. Can it happen? Yes. But we do have tools in place. Someone can go to their sheriff's department or their police office and police chief and get a permit to purchase, which subjects you to the background check. And if you're selling a firearm private party, if I was selling a firearm private party to somebody I didn't know, I would require one of those. I would not sell one because I would be liable if that person did anything with that firearm. So, those things already exist in state law. So, we looked at what can we do to actually help, and what we focused our energy on was school safety and mental health. And I think those were two things that everyone could agree would reduce the problem or minimize the instance of these horrific, heinous crimes. So that's where we focused our energy this session, and I'm really proud that we accomplished some great things. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed them, so those people won't get that.
Regardless of whether you view the governor as being the problem, was it a tactical mistake to put all your eggs in one basket?
I don't believe so, because even when we didn't put them in one basket, the governor vetoed the bills and blamed it because they weren't all in one basket. I mean, I could probably make a lot of money predicting if I could predict accurately what this governor was going to do, but I can't, and neither can anyone else.
He signed 81 bills, didn't he? So there's a chance he would have signed a few of them.
He also vetoed a lot of bills. I didn't keep track of the exact numbers, but
I think it's 10 now at this point.
in just at the end of session here, he vetoed quite a few bills, and I probably some more coming. I just signed quite a few bills the other day, yesterday, I think. Was it yesterday? I think yesterday. So.
Mr. Speaker, in the governor's press conference, he repeatedly said, House Republicans.
I wonder if it's because we're up for election, do you think? Do you think he might be playing politics?
I understand that, but was there, and I understand it's going to be moved fairly soon, but was there a fundamental personality conflict between you and the governor? I mean, I understand that, you said you've said on repeated occasions you got along, but it sure seems like you folks didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things in a real fundamental way.
Well, from my perspective, no. Obviously, from the governor's, he can't seem to get past that. I don't know why. I don't think I've ever done anything, and it really doesn't matter, right? Our personalities don't matter. The job that we have to do and the job that both of us were elected to do is bigger and more important than whether we get along with each other on a personal level. The governor and I do get along fine. I had an aunt and uncle here probably 3 weeks ago, and I was giving him a little tour of the Capitol and just happened to pop into the governor's office. And he happened to just be finishing up a press conference, so he was in the building. And I just asked at the front desk, is the governor here? Could he greet my relative? We spent 20 or 25 minutes in his office, and he was just very gracious. And that's how our personal relationship is. We get along fine. But he obviously, has some problem with, the voters elected a Republican majority in the House and a Republican majority in the Senate. And the governor obviously has some problem with that and wants to change that. So he's throwing, healthcare workers under the bus, and he's throwing school kids under the bus in an effort to try to change that. Shameful, absolutely shameful. So, anything else?
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.